investing.
Okay.
But I do have a couple of interesting questions.
Okay.
And curious on, what's your take on it?
Okay.
I think it was Moody has been predicting lately that, the market in Toronto going to start to, things are going to start to really slow down. They
Right.
anticipate that, kind of know where COVID sits and so forth, but they're anticipating that it's going to slow down. So I'm really interested, Mark, on your take on that, because it comes from a credible source.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. And then secondly, we are, as you can tell, we're not going away anywhere. And we've got more and more people that are connecting with us. They want to invest. And I figure, the best way for me to serve is I continue to encourage them. You watch our show, then we'll connect you with Mark. So for this, it's just a matter of more of these. This is really why do people want to work along with us? Well, because we bring pretty incredible opportunities to them through people like best practice advisors, Mark.
Okay.
So we'll talk about the market, investing, where it's going. Is it going up? Is it going down? And then my last is I'd like to get your opinion on Hamilton and Niagara.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where that's going.
Where do you, pardon?
Where that's going specifically.
Well, yeah, there's people, gee, Michelle, do I invest here? Do I invest here? What's the better city to get into?
Yes.
Another one that came across to us not long ago, and they're really low to get into it, in the 200s, but it's also out in Welland.
Yes.
So I always say, location, location, location. And I know this opportunity you brought to us, and there's just a handful left, the opportunity to get in where it's wholesale. And you only have to put.
Well, and just between you and I and the gatepost, that's what I'm trying to do over the next year.
Okay.
I know of probably 4 or 5 more of these where we're going to be able to buy at 5% down wholesale for 5 years. I'm just trying to set it up so that realtors get commission.
I mean, I've got a handful of people that so the other day as we just brought Steve in, I mean, Steve's a dear.
Yeah, and
no matter what.
From a return on investment perspective, it's so different that it's not even a conversation, right? If you put 20% down in a market that's appreciating at 15%, you still won't get the same return you will by putting 5% down in a market doing 3%.
Yeah.
The 3% market will still appreciate. You'll get a better return than you will in 15%. So where you buy is no longer the issue. It's how much you put down. Right. And that's a huge thing that people don't really pay attention to. Yeah. And builders don't want to do it. So it's about figuring out what builders will do it and how to do it. So we know, for instance, probably not next year, but the year after, there's going to be an opportunity in the Hamilton area where we're going to be able to go in and buy it 5% down.
Smart.
Right? For a 4-year build out. That's going to be huge.
It's
and you're going to be buying places at $300,000. So you're going to be putting 15 grand down. That's huge.
It's massively huge. The other thing that triggered why we did the Waterloo, sure, we have to put a bit more. It's rental student. We did it for another reason, but it's simple. I mean, and for everybody that's watching, Mark, and people that are just coming into this industry, it all comes down to how much liquid cash are you sitting on? Are you going to, and are you sitting, and I'll be honest, Mark, I have clients in our database. I got one 75,000, and I've actually been reaching out to him because he's kind of like, do I do this? And I'm thinking, you know what? I've been reaching out to him. He works 24/7. So he is someone, that's kind of where you got that much, you know what I'd be doing this, because you're going to get a much bigger ROI.
Yes.
With putting it here versus here. And
yes.
Steve is another good example. He goes, Michelle, I'm not getting any younger. This is what my goals are. And I'm like, all right, honey, pre-construction. So it made sense when we connect. I'm like, Steve, I got to get you connected because some people are, okay, you got time on your hands, others, but I'd like the dollar to work as hard as possible in the shortest amount of time now.
And you take that example, that one that we're talking about. In my mind, when I look at that project, if I don't make a 500% return on investment, then I've done something wrong. At 500%, that's 100% return every year for 5 years. That's phenomenal, right? I don't care what you buy in the stock market, you're never going to get that.
I really, that strikes a chord with me because I got asked that question today.
Yep.
And one of our team members, it was one of our, it was actually Ryan, who does all of our marketing and everything for us. And he's like, Michelle, do you invest in stocks? And I'll be very frank and honest, and I've told people this about me. I've never been the person that really feels too comfortable about that, because you're at the demise of everybody else's control. And because I came from that enterprise space, Mark, when you work with the C-level suite and government, and you start to understand what the levers are, and then you also understand just how quickly things are evolving and changing, I just don't feel comfortable. Well, so I didn't go that route. I went a different route.
Yeah, and what I hear from a lot of people who invest in both is they talk about being in the stock market like being in a candy store. There's another candy I can try. I can sell this and buy that one. I can sell this and buy that one. I can buy this and I can buy that and I can buy this and I can buy that and I can buy that, right?
Makes sense.
Whereas in real estate, you can't do it that fast. You're making a decision, you're on that decision for a period of time, right? You can't just sell it tomorrow and buy another one an hour later, right? So it takes away that idea that I can eat as much candy as I want, and you tend to have a better diet.
I love that metaphor. I love it because some people are like that, Mark. To each their own. Some people, they're out there, they're moving, they're shaking, and that's
buying and selling like there's no tomorrow, right?
Yeah. And I'm kind of like, okay, I believe me, I can move quick, I can gear shift.
Yep.
But when it comes to where I want to put my money, I kind of want to put it there, and I just want to know it's going to evolve.
That's right.
I don't really want to get into, oh my God, I got to manage it and do this and do that and do this. And what about that? And what about this? I'm not sure about that. What about that company? You think about this. And in the world that we're in today, and I'm privy to the knowledge of, every year is literally the equivalent of, and I got to go back and check. I can't remember if it's 100 or 200 years, but that's how fast things are moving in terms of speed. So if we think about investing and we're getting a 10% return on something, or getting so are you getting a 10% return on $2,000? Or, yes, it is a little bigger, but I always say the moment that you have the ability to buy, get out of renting and buy, invest in yourself, because we're all investing, but it start with yourself first.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of good to know. I'm glad that cleared that question up, because I don't think in the back of my mind. All right, I guess. So the where the market's going, and this interesting data that came out from Moody.
Are we live already?
We're live, hon. We're talking. It's good to have the conversation. And as I always say to people, even on our team, because we have a lot of people that come to us, right? And some people are saying, oh my God, what are you guys doing? It's like, how are you getting, it's like, get back to having a genuine conversation. And remember, people aren't just going to come out and say, okay, I want to buy and I'm going to do all this. No, that's not how human beings operate.
Yeah.
We just simply have to start with a conversation, but we know what we're looking for. It might not be now, it might be a year. But we got to be there to help them. And I found this fascinating because more and more people we're working with, Mark, they don't know where to start. So then you think, back in the day, the banks were there, but the banks are now here, and it's starting to. We're seeing the result of that, where there isn't really anybody. And real estate is our thing. So full service, we help people buy and sell, and we educate you on how you invest. I don't have all the answers, but I work with people like you, and I trust you. So best practice advisor.
Okay, so you had a question for me.
Yes. So question is, where do you think the market's trending based upon the media and based upon some new data that's just come out by Moody? They claim it's going to slow down,
right?
About 7%, even more, but they definitely claim it's Toronto area that's going to get hit.
Yes.
So I'm curious on what your opinion is.
In my mind, that's impossible.
Okay. And why? Because the data's
simple answer. And we kind of talked about this a little bit the last time when we got cut off. You said that there's 3 stages. It's either going up, it's going down, or it's staying flat, right? And usually the reason why the real estate market would start to go down or stay flat are things like uncertainty in the market. Well, COVID certainly is uncertain. It's creating a lot of uncertainty in the market, right? The second reason that would cause it to go down or go flat is oversupply. we're nowhere close to oversupply. In fact, if you look at most of the research, typically they say we're either short by 20 to 80,000 units a year. That's how many units in the Toronto market we're short.
Okay, so when you say they, and we've actually got a few people chiming in with some questions.
Yep.
Mark, we're streaming live on our page, and we've got a number of people, so we're always going to show up on our, what I call the, right now, folks, the Facebook storefront. That's your business page. Mark, get ready, because 2021 is a very different year. We're just streaming there. We're getting into the big stuff. We're getting into YouTube. We're going across channel. I thrive, and you know what? It's about time. So I believe in getting this kind of info out to the masses. And so there's a question, do you guys foresee the market flattening out due to the second wave of COVID? So this is directly.
Yes.
And your answer to that is?
And so to me, I look at it and say, I think it's already done that. I think it already flattened out, to be honest. I think we missed that opportunity. I think it probably flattened out March, April, May, maybe. By the end of May, I think it started to take off again. And I think the reason was we didn't know what to do with it. And we didn't know how to respond to it. We didn't know how to sell.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, true.
What we saw was a lot of people that were doing Airbnbs, the students, they weren't coming. The Airbnbs were going back into the rental market. So we saw the rental rates go down. But overall, the actual real estate continued to increase, as it should, right? Like I said, there's uncertainty for sure. There's, is there too much inventory? There's not even close to enough inventory on the market for sale. And that's causing a problem, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows how to buy or sell, so they're just not doing it.
True.
But people still want to buy. Right?
Yes. Many reface that right now.
Yeah. And then the last one that you see that causes a lot of problem is unemployment, right? Yeah. If there's unemployment, and there is a lot of unemployment from COVID, without a question, it's being hedged a little bit with the CERB. But the reality is most people who were buying new construction properties or any real estate, they weren't affected by the unemployment. The people that by and large are unemployed are the people who weren't really in the real estate market anyways. That's
a really excellent alignment, Mark. And for those kind of that are watching, is just as you say, we know that a lot of people that were impacted by COVID were from the hospitality, out in public, the restaurants. And in many cases, we already know that a number of the generation, whether you want to call them the younger generation or the older generation, they're juggling 2 or 3 positions to bring the income in. But they're the traditional I don't want to say old fashioned, but they've not necessarily jumped on the highway of internet and figured out, how do I grow my business that way? Or do I join an organization I leverage on the technology side? So, because there are, truthfully, in my opinion, there are more employment opportunities now than there ever been in anybody's lifetime. We just have to get out of this headspace of looking for the employer to hire me. How about getting in there and doing it? Because there is different ways.
There's different ways
for those reasons.
Yeah, there's a whole different venues to make money. But when we look at it, going in January, February, I remember us having this conversation. January, February, real estate was just flying. It was flying out the door. The appreciation was huge. And we were predicting record-breaking years, right? It was already above 2017. And then it slowed down March, April, May. And then it started to take off again. Now, it's still not where it would have been if COVID hadn't happened, but I think this was the dip, right?
It certainly speaks to what we're seeing.
Yes.
And I go back, because there was a couple things you said I want to rewind on, if it's okay.
Yep.
And that is the shortage. So I want to just make a for everybody that's watching, and all realtors, we have, if you're licensed in Ontario, you have what you call the Ontario market, that province.
Yep.
So we're in an era now, Mark, where you can uncover how many homes, all your inventory, how many new constructions are coming on the market. Yep. Like we have the lens. Yeah, it does a little bit of homework, but the lenses are there. So if the lenses are there, you had mentioned something really interesting, and that is the shortage of inventory.
Yep. And that was one of the things. I remember looking at a study that was done by, I think it was the RIA actually, and they were talking about, no, it was StatsCan. They were talking about immigration and what the immigration numbers were. And we talked about this in the past. And, this year it was targeted to be around 450,000. We're not going to hit it, but we're going to hit 300,000. even during COVID, which is huge. Next year, we'll probably hit 500, 600,000. Again, nice number, but that means that 600,000 people looking for a place to live.
Yeah.
Right. But prior to the COVID, they had done some work with StatsCan, and StatsCan had looked at and had interviewed all of the immigrants that were coming in and talking to them about, would they buy real estate in the first 5 years?
Okay.
Right. And 76% of the people that were coming into Canada had every expectation of buying real estate. Okay. In fact, they predicted that in the next year to 2 years, the immigration alone would account for 500,000 to 600,000 transactions in real estate.
What was that again? The immigration would account in how much time frame?
In a 2 to 3 year time frame, would account to 600,000 transactions in real estate. Now,
Wow.
to me, that meant nothing, right? It meant nothing until I realized that in Canada, we only have 350,000 transactions a year.
That almost pretty much doubles it.
Yeah.
Doubles it.
So in 2 to 3 years, we're going to sell more real estate than we would normally sell on an average. So in order to hit that 3-year target, the expectation is, or the need is, about 600,000 units a year. We were only selling on average, best year we've ever had, 350,000 units in Canada.
What about the inventory feeding into it? Because the readiness, right? So that data, in my understanding, exists. It exists within the cities. So what about the readiness?
In Ontario, we produce around 70 to 80,000 units a year. Okay. In Toronto, we produce around 50,000 of those.
So out of the 70 to 80, 50 are coming from Toronto. 50,000 are coming from Toronto. Okay.
And there's a 40,000 gap in Toronto every year. So we're short 40,000 every year.
Okay.
Right. What I don't know is how many units actually transact in Toronto. I don't know. My guess is probably 50% of those 350,000 units that are sold in Canada every year, they probably happen in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That makes sense to me. We're talking buying and selling and all of that stuff, 350,000 transactions, which I thought, wow, that's crazy. But if we're saying that immigration alone is going to account for 600,000, plus we've got our normal people that are like buying and selling, we're going to have a huge shortage, right? Now, the problem is there's still only so much revenue or inventory. If there's only 300,000 units available for sale in Canada this year, but 500,000 people want to buy, we got our disconnect. You've got appreciation. It has to happen.
Yeah.
Right? So when we looked at what would cause a depression, we talked about that first. Then we look at what would cause appreciation. Well, one of the first things that causes appreciation, every realtor will tell you that, is there's not enough supply in the market.
Yeah.
No question, not enough supply in the market.
We had even at the beginning of the year, the Canadian Real Estate Association came right on the set, massive shortage of supply.
Yeah, we can't build enough property.
Yeah, we've got buyers. I have buyers right now, and still to this day, like this is and I love all people, and I'm but sometimes with two things. One, if they're doing on the resale value, if you will, well, we are in. I mean, this is all legal, legal. So what do a lot of people do to try to get the most amount? They're going to do hold off offers.
Yep.
They're going to, and depending on who the realtor is. I mean, I know how we do it, but when we're helping people on that side, believe me, we want 99%, and if they want the most, we're getting to work and professionally doing everything we can to do it. So we put 200 people through a property the other day, 23 offers, and listed at $399, and we got $515. They couldn't be happier. Turned around, they've already bought the next one. They're but it's just because we know that. But we try to educate people. It's not that price point, guys. Yeah. So work with the experienced realtors because they're the ones that get behind it and understand.
Yeah,
so
and if you can look at that and say, so let's say 150,000 units, which I'm sure is not the number, but let's say there's 150,000 units that trade hands every year in Toronto. Mm-hmm. Right? There's 120,000 immigrants coming to Toronto every year, plus the people that are already trying to buy. So you've probably got 300,000 people trying to buy 150,000 properties, which is what we see, right? We see a property goes on the market. We see 500 people go through the property and 20 offers. During the first part of the COVID experience, that wasn't happening because nobody knew how to do it. Nobody knew how to market it. But as we started getting into April, May, they started to figure out ways to do it. And then it started to take off. And you saw the percentages go back up. The for sales, the value, the appreciation started to head back up.
Yeah.
Which is also what happened with new construction. From about March 15th on, there was no new construction. It didn't come to the market.
True. That's right. They were almost holding.
Yeah, they didn't know what to do. Then around July, August, builders started to launch those properties, and they're selling just as fast now as they were before.
They just the other day, this was New Horizons.
Yep.
In Waterdale. They
Yep.
had the beach towns. I think like within less than a few hours, they're gone.
Yep, selling just
gone. So
right, because of that pent up need. But they're selling, but they're marketed for more money than they would have been pre-COVID, and that's something people hadn't thought of. So I was looking at a couple places in Port Credit, and prior to them being launched, they were going to come out at around $700 to $800 a square foot. Okay, that seemed reasonable to me. When they were launched, they were $1,150. Right? In a span of 3 weeks, the price went from $750 to $1,100. What happened? And what happened was the builder stopped and started to go, hang on a second. After this is all over, am I going to be able to make money at $750? I don't know.
Yes, because again, factoring in, we already know all the other aspects with costs and everything. They haven't started building yet. They got the cost to factor in. They've got to factor in.
Well, the cost of lumber has gone up 30%. They know the cost of drywall has gone up. They know the cost of tiling has gone up. They know supply is short. They know that the timeline is going to be expanded. They now know that each individual trade wants to have special safety protocols put into place. So all of that's going to drive the price. They also expect HST to increase. Well, if HST increases, that drywall that you paid $18 for is now 20 or 30 cents more.
Yeah.
Right? Multiply that by 176 units, all of a sudden that's a lot of extra costs they have to absorb in that, and they don't know what it's going to look like yet. They know that the government is spending millions of dollars. I worked out yesterday, the government of Ontario spends $2.2 million a day doing tests on COVID. $2.2 million a day. So we're spending close to $15 million a week just doing tests. Where's the money coming from? We know where it's going to come from at some point, and that's going to drive the costs, right? We know that the individual cities are going to increase their development costs. So the builder knows all of this going in, and they're thinking to themselves, I don't know what the cost to build that building is going to be in 2 years. So I need to hedge my bet a little bit. And instead of marking it at $750, I'm going to market it at $1,100. But the thing is, they still sold out.
Yes. So I have another burning question. And we've talked about this before.
Yep.
That is, again, like Mark, I love to break through the myth. And there are myths. There are perceptions. We can interpret, but boy, oh boy, can we look at the patterning and the trends. And I think that's where I really value this, because it's all about the pattern and the trends that tell you the direction. So what I'm curious is on your opinion. There are other countries in this world where you can't buy, like there is no more opportunity unless you are the, very wealthy, or that's kind of what it is. Yep. And there's also countries where it's gifted generational, down to down to down.
Yep.
I knew years ago, when government were my clients for many years, that Canada was still one of the most economical, cheaper places to live.
Yep.
And basically, yes, there's costs. Well, we don't make enough babies. We have to immigrate.
Yes.
So what do you think is going to happen over the next 10 years to 15 years? I'm curious.
From a real estate, from an immigration perspective, what's your question?
From a cost of real estate perspective and the opportunities for people to get into the market, there are many questions. There's a lot of assumption that government, the government's going to take care. It's going to all settle down. And I'm just curious on how you feel about that.
Here's my thought. It was interesting because I went to a seminar, talked to a bunch of people who were international buyers, and we're talking about things like in some countries you can't buy a property. It's considered a generational property.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? That's the term. And we're one of the only countries who doesn't have something called a generational mortgage. Right? And a generational mortgage is any mortgage that exceeds 30 years in term. We don't have that. Some of the states in the US have that now. Hong Kong, for instance, they have generational mortgages. Europe, most of Europe has generational mortgages. We don't have that yet, and it probably will come to play at some point. But when you look at what's going on, you've got bank rates that they're almost giving you the money for free. Right?
Yes, yes.
And they don't expect those bank rates to change in the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Right? You've got immigration. We're expecting immigration from the GTAA, so Toronto right through the Niagara Peninsula. We're going to go from, I think it's 7 million that we have now to 14 million in the next 10 years.
And my husband was say, because he works for an international company worldwide, they pretty much own when it comes to aviation and surveillance, they own military, they own that. So they're multi-billion.
You're talking doubling the population.
That's what they're looking at doing. As he said, Michelle, Canada's looking to take our population and double it. That's what
we have to, right? Now, we're not going to double Canada's population. We're not going to all of a sudden be 75 million people, right? But what we're going to see is we're going to see a doubling effect in this portion of Ontario. Because one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is the reason we're densifying these cities like Toronto, we're putting so much densification in there, it's because it can handle it and other cities can't. And that's a big deal. You can't all of a sudden say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go up to Dorset, Ontario, population 12,000 people, and we're going to put in 5 towers that are going to house 7,000 people. Because they don't have the systems in place. They don't have the police force, they don't have the hospitals, they don't even have the water system to accommodate that.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
There's only so many places they can do it, and really that's the GTAA, right? They can go to Grimsby and they can say the population of Grimsby will double in the next 10 years. No questions asked. The population of Burlington will double in the next 10 years. Hamilton will more than double in the next 10 years, right? They know that has to happen because we have to bring the people in. They have to go someplace. And that's where we've targeted them to go. We know that 65% of all immigration goes to the GTA. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? And in some people, maybe Michelle decides, I'm tired of being in this, so I'm going to sell my house, make a lot of money, and I'm going to move up north. Well, you might do that. But people coming into Canada will not. Young people will not. They're not going to live up north because they want to live where they've got transportation systems.
Well, and speaking of which, and it's dear, the Ministry of Transportation for 8 years, if you will, they were clients of mine. Readiness CIO, we worked with them extensively. And it's amazing because we're in the onset back then to all this of what we see now. I can remember being part of the project where they were going to try and take the Metro Pass and connect it all the way from municipality to province right across. And where we are now, you're seeing all of the physical build out, but they're working on the bullet train. And where's the bullet train going? Straight through Marmora, Tweed, all the way to Ottawa. So all those areas on the other side of Peterborough, you're seeing scaling in price. So people are kind of getting.
We're going to see those hubs. There's going to be a hub around Ottawa, right? Yeah. There's going to be a lot of hub around Kitchener-Waterloo. There's going to be a hub between Toronto right through to Niagara Falls. And we're going to see a little bit more development out in the Barrie, Orangeville area. But those are the only areas that are cost effective for developers to even work with, right? They can buy the land cheap in Dorset, but they can't build.
So I have a question, because this is something that, it's probably an area that, well, it is an area that I'm very, very, very early onset exploring, and call it maybe an 18-month, 2-year, it may be potential. We are in interesting times with climate change, and we are also in an era, Mark, where from a global perspective, there are a plethora of options where you may not necessarily have to depend on grid.
Yes.
And we're in an era where there are what you call extremely powerful smart grid models that they're not the one that was presented in Toronto. The one that was presented in Toronto a while back, Google, is very dated.
Yep.
And so if you're aligned with the right, so where my brain's kind of pulling me a little bit is, as we are evolving in climate change, because we are in a country with so much growth and opportunity, the one thing that stops that, and why we have the densification, as you just said, they have to be able to support the infrastructure. The infrastructure has to be there. But what if there were not as much of the codependencies on the electric?
Yep.
And will there be those opportunities where communities will be built a little further up, they plug in, that are, we can call it green, but the eco solutions exist. So an interesting company called Natopia is kind of playing in that space.
We talked about that. And will they grow? For sure. You're going to have areas like, I don't know, Calgon. It's out by Caledon, right? It's a small little town. It's going to grow. But again, it can only grow so much. Even if it doesn't need electricity because it's got solar, it still needs a water system. It still needs a sewage system.
But I'm just curious around when we look at, and again, this is more of like an R&D thinking. This isn't really what is, but it's very much of a forward. And when will those options be scalable?
Yeah, and I think they will be scalable, but I think what's going to happen is the vast majority of the population is still going to stay in those urban centers, right? When you and we decide to retire, we might go, this is great. That's exactly where I want to be. I want to slow down my life. I want to live out there in the country where I've got, 100 by 300 foot lot and I can keep bees in the backyard, right? That's what we might want, or maybe I'm going to have chickens or whatever it is.
I'll come visit you. I don't know if it's what I want. But
I'll be in a position to do that because I don't have to go to work every day. Yeah. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, but now because of COVID, we don't have to work. Don't for a second imagine that companies are going to say, you don't ever have to come back into the office.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Right? It's not going to happen. And a lot of people thought that right off the beginning, that, oh, well, I can work at home, so I'm going to go move out to the country. Well, that's okay right now. When COVID's over, and it will end, right?
Pandemics end. They don't last forever. Pandemics end.
When it ends, that company is going to say, I need you to come back into the office. Yeah. I'm not comfortable with you working 5 days a week at your home with your kids and the dog. I want you here because I want to know you're producing. I want to have some level of control. I want to have teams that we can work with. That's just what's going to happen, right? Even though they might have found some efficiencies from a cost perspective, they've lost a lot of control. And that's become very difficult. And very few companies are going to be able to adapt. I know some people say, well, IT companies are perfect for that, but they're not. Because an IT company still has to work as a group. Right?
Absolutely.
It's only so successful.
Yep, absolutely. And we're seeing it. I mean, they want the hybrid's okay, but they want you plugging in. And it is important.
We're just making do, right? And companies are saying, if this is what we have to do to make do, that's great. But don't for a second think all of a sudden you can move out to cottage country and continue to work and make big money at your job, because they're going to want you to come back.
That's right. Yep.
Right? It's just going to happen. So when I look at what's going on in the future, I look and I say, okay, so we're going to see a doubling of the population. And just so you know, about 10 years ago, they predicted a doubling of the population in 10 years. We did it in 7 in the GTAA.
That's very fascinating. That's fascinating. So
we would go from about 3.5 million people in the GTA to 7 million people. And I think it was by, 10 years. We did it in 7. Do I think that we'll hit 14 million in GTAA in 10 years? Yeah, I think we'll probably do it in 7 or 8. Honestly, I think that's how long it will take us to get there. Where are all those people going to go? Yes, there's going to be a lot of densification in Toronto. And even though we go, oh my gosh, it's overcrowded as it is, or in Burlington, it's overcrowded as it is, not in comparison to other countries.
Thank you. You're so,
right.
No, we're urban sprawl. There's so much space in
Toronto is urban sprawl compared to other countries.
Yeah.
right? And when this whole COVID experience is over, don't for a second think that immigration isn't going to be focused on Canada. We're currently the #2 best country in the world to move to, right? We have the best healthcare and it's free. And
we
when
pay
you
taxes for it, but it's still, you know what? We pay taxes and we see it go in the right area.
right. And the incidence of COVID compared to other countries similar in size to us are insignificant, right? We've got states in the US that have more cases than we do with lower population.
Correct.
Right? That's just a sign. And people are going to go, geez, where do I want to move to? If I've got $5 million in my pocket and I can move anywhere I want in the world, where do I want to go? Do I want to go to the place where they did a great job with it and I can have the quality of life I want, or do I want to go over here?
I think the same way. That was my
Just
observation.
to move somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, I look at it and go, it's impossible for the real estate not to go up. The biggest thing that I think is if you're not in real estate now, or you're not thinking about getting into real estate now, you won't be able to in 2 years. That's a really dramatic statement, right? If you look at Toronto now, if you have to put 20% down on a property and the average property is $1.5 million, that means you need to put $300,000 cash down just to come to the table.
Yeah.
And then you've got to be able to get a bank loan for $1.2 million. There's not a lot of people who can do that.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
If in 2 years from now, that property has gone from 1.5 million to 2 million, now you've got to put $500,000 down. How much longer will it take you to put that down payment down?
Yeah.
Right? And we haven't even taken into consideration the wealth transfer, right? We're about to have all the wealth from the baby boomers transferred down to the other generations. What are they going to do? What are they going to do with that money? Right? Some will buy stocks, some will buy, bonds. A lot will buy real estate. One of the interesting things I found out, I'm not 100% on the numbers. In Ontario, there's 80,000 cottages.
80,000 cottages in Ontario?
80,000 cottages in Ontario. What's the population of Ontario again?
Oh my gosh. Oh,
14 million?
If that.
Right? There's about 14 million people in Ontario, and there's 80,000 cottages.
Gee, they're not going to last for too long.
If you want that lifestyle, what's happening to the value of those cottages? If all of a sudden Michelle inherited $10 million and she wants a cottage, you're going to go buy a cottage and you're going to pay 20, 30% more.
And that's very important, Mark. Conversation I had the other day, and I think I want to highlight this is, a lot of people, when they look at real estate, well, and when you buy, you don't want to overpay. Of course, none of us want to overpay, but at the same breath, what real estate really is just point in time and what it's worth to you. And if it's worth more to the other one than you, then guess what? It's worth that. Period. Because they're willing. So when you have bidding wars, okay, and whatever number that's at, and who's to say developers don't eventually entertain this? We don't know. I mean, all models, a model. But it's all about if I want that and I have money, and this is sort of what I try to convey is like, look, people, your money, let's not undervalue what the power of money really does.
It's a huge thing. And I remember I think we've had this conversation before. If I look back 3-4 years ago, I used to look around at my neighbors and I'd see people buying properties on my street for $1 million and ripping down the home and thinking to myself, where did these people come from? Mm-hmm. They just paid $1 million for what I thought was a decent house, and you tore it down to the ground and built a new house. Mm-hmm. Where did you come from? But when you really start to talk to these people, that person just sold their house in Toronto for $4 million, and it was on a 25 by 75 foot lot. Now they've got a 50 by 150 foot lot, and they're going, this is great. I only had to pay $1 million for it.
Yeah.
By the time I'm finished building everything I want in a house, I'm still going to have $2.5 million in my pocket. So to them, it doesn't matter because they didn't work for that extra money. It just happened. And if all of a sudden, like I say, Michelle inherits $10 million, You didn't do anything for that $10 million. You just got it. So the value of it's less important. Now what's valuable to you is what can you do with it? And if you really want a cottage in Muskoka Lake, and that cottage is overpriced at $1.7 million, but that's what you want, you're just going to go buy it.
That's pretty much it in a nutshell. You're
You're
going to
going
buy
to live your best life. You're just going to go buy it. You're going to go, you know what? Maybe I'm paying a little bit more, but I don't want to have to negotiate or fight with 5 different people for this property. It's listed for 1.7. There's 5 other bidders here. I'm going to offer 1.9, and I'm going to walk away. I'm going to bully bid. And that's something I've seen a lot of in the last, say, 3 or 4 months. People are buying properties sight unseen, bully bids. Right? That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
We didn't see that as much pre-COVID, but now we're seeing it where people are going, I'm frustrated. I'm just going in, I'm buying it.
And, you know, I'll be honest, for me, we represent different people, and sure, we're working with more buyers. And Mark, at the end of the day, what are we doing? So I turn around and have a conversation with them and let them know, look, this is right now, this is what I see, and this is where I think it's going to be. So see this number? People, that just brings it to the door. That's not the sale. We're not buying retail here. They're not fixed prices. That's where we're going to be. And for the difference of this amount, which only costs this much in the mortgage, I'm just giving you the information because if we want to win, we got to be there. So what do you think your maximum amount is? Now, one, awesome. And guess what, Mark? Got her in. Great. We have another where they're still feeling it, but I'm trying to kind of convey that, you know what, for those that have it, they're just going to do. And for those that are on the sideline, then.
And you know, one of the things you said is what echoes the most for me is what does it cost in your mortgage? If that place is listed for $700,000 and you really want it, but you're going to have to pay $800,000 to secure it, what does that cost you? Right. What's the true cost? Well, at 2% interest, that costs you $2,000 a year in interest. $2,000. That costs you about $150 a month to have that house that you really want.
That's right. That's exactly the right.
That's what it costs you, is $150. It doesn't cost you, when you're in a 14% interest rate, $28,000. It costs you $2,000. Mm-hmm. If I'm a buyer and that's the place I want, and we get into nickel and diming about, you know, they're offering $350 and I want the place, but I'm only going to offer $355. No way. I'm going in. I'm going to offer more to get rid of everybody because I know that the value of that money is insignificant.
That's right.
Because my interest rate is so low. And I know that if I buy a place for $1.5 million today in a market that's appreciating at, let's be honest, last 10 years, the market in Toronto, in most of Ontario has gone up by 10.3%. So if I buy a property for $150,000 today, it will be worth 1.6 million. Sorry, if I buy one for 1.5, it'll be worth 1.6, almost 1.7 a year from now.
Yeah. Yep. It's not like.
And I'm getting that extra $150,000 for $2,000.
For $2,000. And I think this is where people, you know, what do you do? Well, we help people buy, sell, and then we help educate people on how to invest in real estate. And it's not just one data point. It's a solution.
Yeah. As buyers, as we get in our own way, right? You know, we look at property and, you know, it might be in our own neighborhood. And we're thinking, you know, 3 years ago, that property sold for $500,000 because I remember seeing it. And now it's on the market for $900,000. Those guys are nuts. What are they thinking? Right.
And meanwhile, yeah.
You never stop to think, well, what's my place worth?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Maybe my place is actually worth $2 million. I don't know because I never asked the question. I'm still thinking that place is worth $500,000. Right? Not $1 million.
That's right.
$100,000 because I can't believe the appreciation. We get in our own way.
So much of us, and I use that phrase a lot because Mark, it was even. I mean, it's. When the rate is at an all-time low.
Yes.
And you can, you know, as they say, as an investor, you don't use your money. You use the little, to keep it simple, you use the least amount of your money.
Yep.
you borrow where you can, and you purchase. I mean, I know I've had pre-construction because of market value, where they're going to be. And when you were saying the other day, well, do I do a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom? And you were saying, really, look for the smallest unit. Look for the smallest unit.
There's a basic entry point for any building. It's always the smallest unit will get you the biggest dollar for your buck. But like I said, one of the things that we were talking about last time is what's more important? Is it the down payment or is it the location? And the reality is the absolute best decision is the lowest amount down. Yeah. That has the biggest impact. And people haven't really thought about that. If I buy a property in downtown Burlington for $1 million, right? Let's say it's new construction. I put 20% down. I just put $200,000 down.
Yeah.
If that property appreciates by 15%, right? I've made $150,000. But I've still only made a 75% return, right? Because I put 200 down, yeah, and it's increased by 150, so I've only made a 75% in return.
Yeah.
But let's say I took that same and I went out to Hamilton and I bought $1 million property, but I put 5% down, right? If that $1 million property in Hamilton went up by 5%, I just made 100% return. That's a huge difference.
Yes.
So in Burlington, we're getting a 15% return. In Hamilton, we're getting a 5% appreciation, but the down payment makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Because 5% of $1 million is only $50,000.
That's right.
Right? And if that property only goes up by 5%, it's gone up by $50,000. I've just made 100% return. So in order for me to get the same return, that property, it only needs to appreciate by 2.5%, 3%. And I'll get the same return as that expensive property in Burlington, right? Yeah. Where I put $200,000. But I put that much money into a property when I can get away with putting 5% down.
And this is a message right here, this lesson, if you will, because that's what this is. I mean, if anything, one day, Mark, we're going to break it all out to convey it, because it's really helping people. We got to break the myths. I get evolution. The banks were in the industry for so many years, and this is how it was served, but those days are not here anymore.
No.
We're in a very different era. We're in 2020 going forward, and money makes money. And people, we don't just all of a sudden wake up and somebody hands me the 10 million, you go out and you earn it.
Yes.
And that's how you do it. And it's just getting out of our own way, and success leaves clues, and we learn, but we don't just sit and guess. We do have to act.
And we're gonna see the distribution of money is obviously going to change significantly. The people who were wealthy pre-COVID are going to be more wealthy. Mm-hmm. People who were middle class they're going to be less off. And you're going to see a bigger divide when COVID's over, right? And that's unfortunate. That's just a reality. And if they introduce things like a guaranteed income, which they're talking about, that's going to be even worse for the economy. Right? Because if all of a sudden Michelle's getting $2,000 a month to stay home, you're not going to go work at Tim Hortons for $15.
It's not really the kind of one behavior drives another behavior. I don't know about giving up. That behavior is a little,
Why would I work there for slightly more money at the end of the day? So now Tim Hortons is going to have to, instead of pay $15, they're going to have to pay $18 to attract you to come and work, which is great. That's good for the employee of Tim Hortons, right? They're going to make more money. But what does that mean to the coffee? Well, when I have my coffee is no longer $1.85, it's $2.20.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, the person who is the boss of the person at Tim Hortons, well, they want to make more money. And it just continues to scale up. So now all of a sudden, the person who was comfortable making $50,000 a year now needs to make 65 to stay at the same ratio that they were before. So all we're going to see is more money flowing into the market if they go that way, and we're going to see inflation. And if we see inflation, we're going to see real estate increase.
Yeah.
Because it drives real estate too.
Exactly. And has it ever been any different?
Right? So you're going to see bank rates. If they stay low, real estate goes up. If inflation happens, real estate goes up. If immigration increases, which we know it has to happen, real estate goes up.
What do you think, Mark, would make the bank rates go up?
I don't think the bank rates can go up for at least another 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And the problem with that is because the economy's relied on it so heavily. Remember, the bank rates were low before COVID,
That's right.
right? They've gone a little bit lower again. If they were to go all of a sudden, I closed on a property the other day, I got a 1.8% for 5 years. If all of a sudden that was 4%, there's going to be a lot of people underwater who's going to have to sell their property. So the government doesn't want to do something dramatic like that. So they're going to slowly cusp it up. But how many years does it take to go from 1.8% mortgage rate to, say, a 4 or 5%, which is probably more reasonable?
Yeah.
4 years, 5 years?
About 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years to get it there. Well, what could happen in the next 3 to 5 years to our economy? Well, we might see another dip in the economy, right? One of the things that I find interesting, we were talking about the stock market earlier, is a lot of people are buying stocks like crazy right now, but the companies aren't actually giving any insight into what's going on in their businesses. So how are you making that decision? If Walmart's not telling you what their sales are like, and they're not telling you what quarter-on-quarter profits like, how can you make a decision to buy their stock? But the market doesn't care, they're buying it anyways. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And when I think about the big bricks and mortar and the so forth, and there's just lots of transition, if you will. I mean, I know every person needs the roof over their head.
Yep, everyone needs a roof over their house. I can't, I see there being some short-term pain in the real estate rental market for a while, but that's until the COVID experience is over. And when that's over, everybody who's got their Airbnb properties is going to put it back into an Airbnb environment because it's more profitable for them.
Yeah.
The students are going to come back and they're going to start taking up a lot of that supply that's left over. So short term, we're going to see it. We're going to continue to see a little bit dip in the rental market. So for me, I would look at it and say, if there's going to continue to be a little bit of a dip in the rental market, maybe I don't want to necessarily own a property today, but I want to buy a property that's going to be built in 3 years.
Yeah.
Right? Because 3 years from now, that supply is going to be, there's not going to be enough supply, and all of a sudden the rental rates are going to go back up, and that's when I'm going to get occupancy, or I'm going to get control of that unit. So that's, to me, why I'm thinking pre-construction and saying, okay, I want to buy that unit that's going to be built 3-4 years from now, not necessarily the one that's going to be built tomorrow, as an investor.
Exactly. And Mark, same kind of just from where we are right now. I mean, we're literally okay, well, we have that, 30 sitting there. Okay, well, wait a second, 50, we might have that. And it's just, you continually have to be taking that and putting it in. And but as you say, with pre-construction, and we've had the experience, I'm not saying other people have had all of this, but every pre-construction, Mark, we've gained. And that's what kind of enabled us to stay focused on pre-construction. We did do the other one recently. It was a gutted properly. It was a old shoe factory, and they tore it down right to the bones, 2002, built it back up. But that was, okay, wait, student, 5 bedrooms. We can get the most amount, so we can get $800 for each room. Different story, but where am I going to be able to make the 20% or the 30%? Where am I going to make? So if I give them 50, can I get a 300K return?
Yeah, but in pre-construction, that's where I would be right now, is I'd be looking and saying, okay, buy that property that's going to be built 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now. All things will change in those 5 years. You might start seeing the interest rates start to swing up a little bit, but not much. Meanwhile, we'll have almost doubled in size in this area.
Yeah.
They can't build more houses than they're building now. And that's one of the things, is we always say that the supply is so low, there's not enough inventory being built because they can only build so much.
And they only have so many resources to build, just as you say, they can only build so much.
There's only so many drywallers. There's only so many electricians. Yeah. There's only so many plumbers. There's only so many builders out there. There's only, if we started in Burlington, if all of a sudden they blocked off all of Brant Street and all of North Shore and all of Lake Shore so they could build all the properties that they got planned to build, every citizen in Burlington would be having a freak. because they can't get around. There's a stalemate, and all of a sudden we can't move as citizens, and we would go nuts. So what ends up happening is the city controls who gets a building permit and why, and you're going to get yours, but we want you almost done before the next one starts because
Project planning.
we have to
Project
plan
planning.
all these things,
Yeah.
right? If you look in Hamilton right now, I know of about 24 builds on the books, ready to go. They have to sell them still, but they can't be launched because the flow of traffic has to be managed.
It's kind of like the airport.
It has to happen, right? So the city has to control that. Imagine that in Toronto. If all of a sudden they blocked off 3 or 4 exits, the city's going to grind to a halt so that 4 builders can build? No, they're going to say you can build, and when you're almost here, then we'll let you get your permits to start selling, and then and so they have to control it.
Yeah. So Mark, just kind of wrapping up and everything here, and there's far too many indicators, Mark, that are as fact-based as you can get, because fact-based, where it all points to the growing demand, and that growing demand isn't going to stop. It's going to continue to grow, and this is still going to go at the same pace.
Yeah, and as an outsider, if I was an investor, I would say that, the real estate, it looks like it's appreciating too fast, right? It looks like everything is going up too much. But the reality is, if you look over 50 years, real estate in Ontario has grown by 6.3% a year, every year for 50 years.
That's
now we're 10%. It seems dramatic, but even at a 6% growth, that's huge. Yeah. Because if the average price in Burlington is what, 700,000 now for a property?
For a detached?
Yeah.
A detached?
Yeah.
More like 8 to be able to get into something decent.
If you have an $800,000 property, and let's say it's only appreciating at 5% a year, to make my math pretty easy, in 2 years it's 900,000. In 4 years, it's over $1 million, and that's at 4 or 5% appreciation, and that's not happened. We haven't had 4 or 5% appreciation in Burlington in probably 8, 9, 10 years now. And even if you were to look at over the 50-year span, there's been some years where we haven't had much appreciation. But if you were to take a 5-year chunk, any 5 years, consistent 5 years, you'll never see the average was less than 6%. That's huge.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to continue because we're going to continue to have the growth. So to me, if you're thinking 6% growth, if you're putting 20% down, all of a sudden you're getting a 24% return. 24% return on your money just with a 6%. If you put 5% down, what are you getting? Right? You're getting 120% return if you've only put 5% down. So the amount that you put down is huge.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can invest in out there today where you can get a 30 or 40 or 50 or 100% return, except
Mark,
real estate.
From kind of the on or off 20 years that I've been following it, and again, getting in as an investor in the last 6, I'd say. So not that long, but to be able to do that in that time frame and understand, wait, this can be done. It's just getting out of your own way and following those people, following, if you will.
It really is. And when you look at housing today, there's the rule of 72, if you recall, right?
Yeah.
In the Ontario market, the value of your house will double every 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. Right? So if you buy a house today for $300,000, in 2026, it's worth $600,000.
So we have kind of go back to this with a lot of clients that we have where they have so much in RSPs.
Yep.
And they know it's not working for them. And they're like, there's got to be a better way, Michelle. So then you start having the conversation. Let's get very real. That's liquid money. How much return are you getting on it? Okay. And you guys are thinking about investing. All right. And so over here, there's the potential of you gaining this in this time frame. And let's not fool ourselves. The banks are business. They're there to make money, period.
Yeah.
So you can think of yourself as just a citizen and resident, or you can think yourself as the CFO and you're running your own P&L statement.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So do you want your money working harder for you?
Yeah. And you know what? It's the attitude that you've given and the knowledge that you're passing on that's creating even more desire, right? There might be in the Hamilton region or the Burlington region, there might be 100 families that want to buy a house in the next 2 months. And they want to buy a house to live in.
Yeah.
Right. But they're now competing with 150 people who are saying, I want to buy it so that I can renovate it or
Yeah.
I can rent it out. So now that 100 families that were competing for those 40 properties now have another 150 who have got no personal interest in this property. They just want what it can give them in return.
Yeah.
Right. And it's next to near impossible to make less than a 25% return on an investment in real estate. It's hard to do less than that. So if you're an investor, all of a sudden you're taking your equity from the first place and buying another one and buying another one.
And that's
the investors, we didn't have those 15 years ago. We didn't have people that were conglomerating and buying in bulk. We didn't have people teaching people how to buy real estate. Now it's all over the place. So now you're seeing people, average Joes, who, you know, mom and dad, they have $40,000 in equity and they've got some equity in their house and they're going to buy another house and then they're going to buy another house with that house. And all of a sudden they've got 5 houses and that's their retirement plan. Yeah. That didn't exist 10 years ago.
That's fascinating because I, you know,
and it's
I never really looked at it from that. I mean, that's the path that we have, but
right. Realtors are teaching people how to take the equity in their home and to use it to make them money. Because let's face it, equity in your home is making you nothing.
No. And doing those reverse mortgages, please, people.
Yeah, you know,
there's better options out there.
If I've got $100,000 in equity in my home, if I take that $100,000, it costs me $2,000 a year to have it.
Yeah.
And now I can go buy something that's going to pay me 20 or 30%.
Yeah.
Where's the bad side to that, right? And as more and more people learn that, more and more people go, okay. And all of a sudden you start hearing about it and you hear it. You hear about people who probably would never have thought of real estate as an investment in the past, and all of a sudden they have 3 properties. You know, you bought your first property how long ago? And now you're buying your second property. And then you're going to buy your third property.
Yeah.
You never thought of yourself as wanting to be a landlord. Or you take Roy. You know, he buys one by mistake.
Yeah.
He buys another one. And then he buys another one. Next thing you know, he's got a whole business because of a mistake. But he's looking at it going, I can make more money on that business than I can doing what I do every day.
And he's a great example because coming into the industry, and a lot of people will look at real estate, and for, you know, people get into it for a lot of different reasons. But what we're finding now, and actually even more people are coming to us because they want to work with us.
Yes.
Is they're and we're only letting people in that think and like they've got to be part of our culture. Yes. So they can think like a high-end consultant,
yep.
IT consultant. They can gear shift real fast.
Yep.
And you've owned your own, you know, if you own your own business before, that was really, really helpful.
Yep.
Then you're more than halfway there. The rest of the stuff we can teach.
It's so easy to do it because you know what, you don't even have to run it anymore. And that's what's attractive about it as well. I can go and I can buy a property and I can get you to put a tenant in there. And I can get you to manage the property on a day-to-day basis. I don't even have to go to the property.
No.
I don't even have to cash the checks. All of a sudden, it's a totally hands-off decision for me. All I know is at the end of the day, I'm making money on my property. I don't even know where it is. Now, I wouldn't ever advocate that, but you can make it that hands-off if you want, and you're still going to make money.
Well, Roy, you know, did he ever think he'd be first of all, he says, Michelle, I never really thought I'd be a millionaire because you're just putting one foot forward in front of the next and you're growing. And then all of a sudden he wakes up, holy crap, my my net worth is about 8 mil. What have I been doing?
Yep.
But he said, as the best thing he ever did, getting into it, even though he got in when he was a realtor, was the investing side. He says, I will never regret that. And then manage. And he started, well, and that's what happened by default. People started, looking for, can you manage? He says, yeah. So he starts building that. Before you know it, he's got 100 properties to manage.
So now he's built a business where he's got $8 million worth of real estate. Mm-hmm. Okay. That means that every year doing nothing, that real estate appreciates by $800,000.
It's close to $1 million a year.
And the year after that, it's going to be $890,000. All of a sudden, he can retire perfectly happy because he's appreciating close to $1 million a year. Most people can retire comfortably on $1 million a year.
Very much so.
Right?
Yep.
So yeah, I look at it today and I think if you're not in real estate or you're not getting into real estate as far as buying in the next 2 years, chances are you won't be able to buy. Unless you win the lottery or you get a big inheritance or something like that. But the average consumer won't be able to buy.
Yeah.
Because the market will have moved that fast. And like you were saying earlier, what used to take 100 years is now taking a year.
That's it. I actually think, to be very honest, Mark, and I don't want to put but if I recall back, and I'm going to get the data point, I think they said like it's going to get to 200 years in a year. So just think about the evolution, the change, all of this. So for people that are sitting there and,
Yeah, and how many people have more than one job now?
Oh,
everybody talks about side hustles, right? That's the common term now. Well, I have a job as a firefighter and I'm making $75,000 a year. That's great. But then I get 4 days off. And so I sell real estate as well as a side hustle. And then I buy this and I buy that. Or I've got a job where I work ABC hours doing whatever it is, but then I'm drop shipping stuff from Amazon. Or I'm driving.
How many Uber drivers are out there?
Or whatever it is. But all of a sudden, my side hustle is creating an extra $20,000 or $30,000 in money for me every day, right? Or every year. Now, all of a sudden, I've gone from a $70,000 a year income to a $100,000 a year income, to $150,000 or whatever it is. And we're seeing that. We're seeing people making $200,000-$300,000 a year. Whereas that was the upper echelon.
Yeah.
Right?
Very, very true.
Not the real estate business. Nobody in the real estate business makes that kind of money.
No.
Right.
But no, you're building, you're investing so that you surpass. So I'm okay to do it steady, slow, let these things grow, and you got business for life, and you got choice in life. So Mark,
if anybody has questions, they can certainly send me an email through you. And I will
absolutely
questions for sure.
We'll encourage that. We'll encourage them. We got to have you back soon, and you'll hear from me by Monday.
Okay, thanks.
All right, awesome. Have a good one. Thanks, Mark. Bye, everybody.